UFC grappling breakdown. I did the preview show from the shitter, and now we'll do the post-event recap. I've updated. We got a microphone and we got a light here. I know so many complaints always about my audio, so hopefully this one works perfect. Let's go over the tragedy of the Kron Gracie versus Charles Jourdain fight. I think we all knew deep down that it was going to be tough for Kron to go out and do what he's done in a lot of his fights, especially if you go back and watch in Japan, pull close guard and effectively pull off submissions from there. There's a reason that doesn't really happen in MMA, but obviously not a lot of grapplers Kron Gracie's caliber try to do it, which is why it was so exciting to see him come back. A lot of pressure on the guy. He comes back. I think his record was 5-1. They put him straight on the main card. So much attention towards him. They put him as a thumbnail of the embedded. There was a lot of pressure on him. I really had a lot of questions about who his camp was, who he was training with, because historically he would train with the Diaz brothers. This time he had Damian Maia in his corner. I know Damian Maia lives in Brazil, so I'm not sure how long Damian was a part of his camp for. Either way, still pretty cool to have Damian in the corner. Damian is a guy that did what probably Kron Gracie needs to do to have a successful MMA career. If you go back and watch his fights against like Anderson Silva early days, you saw he had no wrestling ability and he ended up pulling guard a lot. You saw him make a crazy adjustment. I know he wrestled a lot with my friend Cody Hammerer up in Hoboken. I'd wrestle with him at Edge, and he really improved his wrestling, and you saw him become super effective at singles and doubles and wrestling against the fence and putting guys down. He evolved, even though he made it very far with his initial skill set. But again, this was a sad fight. We haven't seen him for 4 years. We didn't know what would happen. Came out very similar to what we've seen previously. He was able to pull close guard. One of them was really slick, and I kept going back trying to think, how did he do that? How did he pull close guard and extend him out at the same time? And I think he might have had a sneaky grip on the glove, but I don't want to point any fingers because he will still beat the shit out of me. But yeah, he was trying to be effective from close guard, but Charles Jourdain, black belt himself, was very disciplined. He just didn't take any risks. When he was in close guard, he didn't try to really do anything. He didn't try to posture and strike. He just stayed disciplined, kept his elbows tight. Kron's looking to trap a shoulder. He's looking to trap an elbow across body and set up arm bars and potential triangle choke threats. Charles Jourdain was aware of that, stayed disciplined, patient, and postured out at the right moment. Not just postured, exploded out, backed out at all costs. So yeah, it was a sad one to watch. But again, cool to see Kron after we haven't seen him for 4 years. He ended his grappling career quite early. Obviously, he'd already accomplished a lot. He won ADCC. But yeah, it would have been cool to see where he could have gone with that. And now in MMA, he sort of disappeared a bit early in his career, made a return now. And I'm not sure where he goes next. But yeah, he used to be in California, now lives in Montana. So I'm not sure what his training camp is like. I'm not sure really anything surrounding this fight. Maybe he was injured. But we were robbed of some beautiful grappling in that fight. But we got to see it in Diego Lopez versus Movsar Evalaev. I have no idea how to say that second guy's name, so we'll call him Movsar. But Diego Lopez is a Brazilian fighter, but I know he trains a lot out of Mexico, and I saw a lot of similarities in how he approached guard to other Mexican grapplers, especially Yair Rodriguez. Those guys do in close guard what I guess we wished Kron was able to do, but again, he wasn't dealing with an opponent that respected his guard as much as Charles Jourdain respected Kron Gracie's guard. If you're in Kron Gracie's close guard, you do nothing. You panic, you stay tight, you don't really do much. Movsar allowed openings because he wanted to ground and pound, and we saw Diego Lopez set up some crazy submissions off his back. And again, I don't know what's going on with these Mexican fight camps, but they have crazy, dangerous close guards. If anyone rests, elbow, they have crazy up kicks. They do not let you rest after the takedown. They go contrary to what a lot of people do now, which is they get taken down, they walk to the cage, they use the cage to get back up. A lot of these Mexican fighters, or obviously Diego Lopez is Brazilian, but he trains out of Mexico. A lot of these guys just go crazy from close guard, using elbows to create angles with the hips, throw up kicks, never let them rest. And he used a classic combination of those threats to be super dangerous off his back. And I think, honestly, he should have won rounds 1 and 3. If he lost rounds 3 to the judges, something is wrong with the judging. We already know that. But if you almost finish a guy in a submission, that should count for something major. It should outweigh a takedown. So in round 1, he was able to secure a super tight armbar. Movsar really ate probably a couple pops, got out of there, but really what cost Diego Lopez was he adjusted on the armbar, he adjusted the grip, and that allowed Movsar to get the knee behind Round 2, he came in pretty tired, and I think a last-minute replacement, 5 days notice. But he sort of like didn't look too good in round 2. I was worried about how he'd come out in round 3, but round 3 he came out, pushed the pace, probably thinking it was 1-1. Obviously, one of the judges had given rounds 1 and 2 to Movsar. Everyone should have given round 2 to Movsar, but yeah, I thought round 1 and 3 should have gone to Diego Lopes. Round 3 comes out hard. He's throwing submission threats, and he uses a K-guard style entry to engage the legs and attack a knee bar. Knee bar is a great threat for MMA if you're quick and if you can push your opponent in the wrong direction, because again, when you go for leg locks, typically you commit 2 hands to the leg, and that can cost you because they can strike you. But if you're quick and your hips move well enough, you can redirect your opponent's weight away from you, preventing them from striking. Something that happens with the knee bar, though, it's very difficult to break a leg. I know you look at it, you think, oh, hip extension, you're going to be able to break that pretty quick. It's not as easy as breaking an arm. Even an arm is tougher to break than most people think. You need to get things perfect to really get that catastrophic break. So Movsar using 2 hands on the ankles there and applying hip pressure sometimes isn't enough when time is a priority. And Movsar was able to eat that and ride it out to the end of the round. Something interesting Movsar did, if you go back and watch it, he reached through and he placed his hand in front of the shin, his own shin, trying to provide just a little bit of counter force, something in the way of Diego's hip extension. I first saw something very similar when Keenan was getting knee-barred by Yuri Simões. He basically cupped his own kneecap. It just meant that Yuri had to apply a little bit more pressure than he could to really get that break. So some of these defensive strategies will not stop you taking damage, but they will stop you getting broken entirely. Further, I cannot reiterate how cool these Mexican fight camps guard game is. They're using a lot of cool stuff. They'll trap a shoulder like Hélio Gracie would from close guard. They'll get an elbow across, something typical of Shanji Hibera. You can go back and watch him versus John Salter at ADCC. Crazy, tight submission threats from close guard. And I think those upper body submissions are good when an opponent hunkers down in the guard. In those positions, you'll see these guys use elbows or look to really attack shoulders and get elbows across, really highly active. And in this situation, Movsar postured up to strike, and he went for a K-guard style entry inverted to the legs. I think an active guard is the only way you're going to make it work for MMA. You have to be so aggressive that the guy doesn't even really have time to think about striking or time to think about holding you down and rest. If you go back and watch Josh Emmett Yair, he'd get the takedown and he'd sit too low on the hips, open up those strikes there, those elbow strikes that are super scary. Something Tony Ferguson would do if you go back and watch him against Kevin Lee. You have to have a guard that's so dangerous the top guy can't rest. And that's something I'm seeing a lot out of these Mexican fight camps, something super impressive. And these closed guard submission threats brings me back to a time of like Nogueira, where he'd use like a collar tie and a wrist grab and he'd be throwing up triangles. It is a high risk game. You're going to take some strikes, but again, you can make it work if you're quick enough. And you saw it here. And again, I think Diego Lopes should have won that fight. He almost finished him when time was running out. I do not know how they could give round 3 to Movsar when all he had was a takedown. So we were robbed of some beautiful jiu-jitsu in the Kron Gracie fight. Jourdain was able to shut that down. A bit of a boring fight, really, but no, you can't blame Jourdain. He's dealing with Kron Gracie's guard. No one's going to take any risks in there. We've seen what Kron can do from the closed guard. If you don't believe me, go back and watch him against JT Torres. And we were gifted this surprise grappling exchanges between Diego Lopes and Movsar Evelaev. I mean, I'd love to even see them run that back with Diego Lopes having a full camp. Apart from that, sadly, we didn't see too much grappling. I imagine Gilbert probably injured his AC joint. If you go back and look, he really took a hard impact to the top. You take an impact to the top, weight on top of that, you're going to take a lot of shoulder injuries. AC joint is common. And then the only other grappling I saw was Aljamain against Cejudo. I didn't think Aljamain would be able to take him down in open space, but his length and his strength against the cage, you saw he was effective in getting Cejudo down. Props to Cejudo. His defense against Aljamain's back takes was brilliant. Aljamain never really consolidated a strong back take. And not only that, Cejudo was able to use the cage to get back up while under threat of the back take. So he wasn't just defensive. He was able to move out of those positions and climb back to their feet. Again, super impressed with both of them there. Cejudo's ability to negate Aljamain's throwing hooks, looking for body triangles was beautiful. Aljamain taking down Olympic gold medalist against the cage was crazy, and that's something beautiful to see. That's a great equalizer between a pure wrestler and someone that has experience against the cage. That can really equalize those two skill sets. But super close fight, super exciting. And that's basically it for the grappling breakdown. I won't comment on the striking because I fucking know nothing.